A very good morning to our lecturer, Dr. Faiz. So today for our assignment, we are referring to the BQS656 July 2023 partial question. So in this question, it presents a developer who is planning to construct an office block on a 3,000 meter square piece of land. So the land was purchased 3 years ago at a price of 450 ringgit per meter square, and the allowable plate ratio is 1 to 5. This means for every 1 meter square of land, the developer is allowed to construct up to 5 square meter of floor area. Therefore, the total allowable GFA is 3,000 meter square multiplied by 5, which give around 15,000 square meters. So based on this information provided, the developer wants to determine two main figures. So for the first figures is the total present cost of the proposed development, and the second one is the annual equivalent cost of the project throughout its 60 years of economic life.
To start my presentation, I'm going to present about the amount of ASF plus I, which is 0.0761. First, we start with site cost. Based on the information below, to get the amount of site cost for present cost is we use site cost times amount of 1. While for annual equivalent cost, we use freehold site, which is site cost and time amount of 1 time interest. The first thing we need to do is to find the amount of 1 at 7% at 5 years. So why we use 5 years? This is because the cost of land is bought 3 years ago, while the construction period is 2 years onwards, which this made the total years is 5 years. So that amount we get an amount of 1.4026. So the site cost is 450 ringgit times 3,000 meters square. So these both two numbers we will times and get an amount of 1.893 million for present cost. While for annual equivalent cost, based on the formula, we will times 1.35 million times 1.4026 times 7%, where we get an amount of 132,000. Next, we're moving on to construction cost for the present cost and annual equivalent cost. The first item is building cost. The amount of building cost is 2,300 ringgit. We times it with 3,005 ratio of allowable GFA. We got an amount of 34,500. While the infrastructure is 25% of the building cost, which we get amount of 8.625 million ringgit. Next item is preliminary cost, which is 2 million based on the information from the question before. The other item in the construction cost will be continued by the next presenter, and he will total up the construction cost before we times it with the formula.
Next, I will explain about the next part, which is the contingencies, the pre-development cost, and also the annual management cost. First is the contingencies. Contingencies cost. A contingency is an allowance set aside to cover overseen expenses during construction stage, such as design changes, additional work, unexpected site conditions, or fluctuations in material prices. So based on this question, the contingency rate is around 3%. So this percentage is applied to the total construction related costs, which include building construction costs, infrastructure costs, and also the preliminaries. The total of these three elements is around 45 million ringgit. And after multiplying it by 3%, the contingencies cost is around 1.3 million ringgit. This amount is then added to the total project cost. For the pre-development cost, this cost incurred before construction begins and include expenses such as professional consultancy fees, planning approval fees, feasibility studies, site investigation, legal fees, and other administrative costs required to prepare this project. In this question, the pre-development cost is already stated as 9 million ringgit, and Hence no calculation is required. Next, this value is directly added to the present cost of the development because it represents a necessary investment before construction can commence. So the total for present cost is around 55 million ringgit, and for the annual equivalent cost is around 4.2 million ringgit after we multiplying the present cost, the total present cost with the total ASF plus I, which is the 0.061. Next, I will explain the annual management cost. This refers to the recurring yearly expenses required to manage and operate the completed building. Expenses include building management, administration, security services, cleaning, maintenance coordination, and other operational activities that ensure the building function efficiently. According to this question, the annual management cost is 10% of the construction cost. As I mentioned just now, the total construction cost used is around 45 million ringgit, resulting in annual management cost is around 4.5 million ringgit per year. Since this cost occurs every year throughout the building's 60 years economic life, we convert it into its present value by using the present value of one factor. The present value factor is 14.0392, which result around 63 million ringgit after multiplying it with the total cost per year, while the annual equivalent cost remains 4.5 million ringgit per year.
For this part, I will explain on the maintenance and operating cost calculation. Cost of maintenance and operation means the cost to keep the building operating efficiently throughout its life cycle. So the maintenance and operating cost is RM 450,000 per year with economic lifespan of 60 years and 7% interest rate. By using the year's purchase factor of 14.0392, the total present value is calculated as 450,000 multiplied by 14.0392, which gives 6,317,640 ringgit. As for the annual equivalent method, there will be no adjustments as as it will just use the annual cost, which is 450,000 ringgit. Next, proceed for the replacement of minor services every 5 years. Please take note that there will be no minor services every 10 years as those years have major services replacement. Therefore, starting from year 5 up until year 55, we will get 1.4251. Therefore, in order to get the present value, we need to multiply the RM. We need to multiply the cost of minor services replacement every 5 years, which is RM 250,000 with 1.4251. Then we will get 356,275 ringgit. As for the annual equivalent method, uh, we need to multiply the cost of 250,000 ringgit with 1.4251 and ASF plus interest rate, which is 0.0761. Therefore, we will get 27,112 ringgit and 53 cent.
Next, I will explaining on the major service replacement. The estimated cost for the major service replacement is 500,000 ringgit Malaysia. This replacement is planned to occur every 10 years throughout the 60-year life cycle. However, replacements are only carried out in years 10, 30, and 50, and there is no replacement in years 20 and 40 because those years already involved in major renovation works, during which the building services are replaced as a part of renovation process. This prevents double counting the replacement costs. To determine the present value of these future costs, a discount rate of 7% is applied. These present value factors are 0.5083 for year 10, 0.1314 for year 30, and 0.0339 for year 50. These values give a total present value factors of 0.6736. The present value method is calculated using the following formula. Present value equals to periodical cost times by total PV of 1. Therefore, 500,000 ringgit Malaysia times by 0.6736 equals to 336,800 ringgit Malaysia. This present value represents the current worth of all future major service replacement costs after considering the time value of money. Next, the annual equivalent method is used to convert the present value into an equivalent annual cost over the building's life cycle. The formula is annual equivalent times by periodical cost times by total PV of 1 times by ASF times interest. In this analysis, the ASF times interest is calculated using an accumulative rate of 3%, which give a factors of 0.0761. Therefore, 500,000 ringgit times by 0.6736 times by 0.0761 equals to 25,630 ringgit and 48 cents. This means the major service replacement contributes an equivalent annual cost of 25,638. No, it's not 38. Now, moving on to the major renovation replacement, the estimated cost for the major renovation is 5 million ringgit Malaysia. Major renovation are scheduled every 20 years, specifically in year 20 and 40 to restore and upgrade the building's major components and system. Using the same 7% interest rate, the present value factors are 0.2584 for year 20 and 0.0668 for the year 40. The total present value factors is 0.3252. Applying the present value method, present value equals to periodical cost times by total PV of 1. The calculation is 5 million ringgit Malaysia times by 0.3252 equals to 1,626,000 ringgit Malaysia. Using the annual equivalent method, annual equivalent equals to periodic cost times by total PV of 1 times by ASF times interest. With the ASF times interest factor of 0.0761, the calculation becomes 5 million ringgit Malaysia times by 0.3252 times by 0.0761 equals to 123,738 ringgit and 60 cents. This represents the equivalent annual cost for major renovation of a building's life cycle. Finally, when all life cycle cost components are combined, the total present value is 129,360,865 ringgit Malaysia only. The total annual equivalent cost is 9,493,460 ringgit Malaysia and 90 cents.
From the calculation, we can see that the total cost for present cost is 129 million, while the total cost for annual equivalent cost is 9 million. The next thing we do, we have to do a present value of 1 for both costs. We use an amount of PV of 1 at 2 years at 7%. Why 2 years? Is because the construction period is 2 years onwards, so we have to bring it backwards to get the present value, which we get an amount of 0.8734. So both costs we will times it with 0.8734 and we get an amount of 112 million for present cost and 8 million for annual equivalent cost. Thank you.